Chapter 1. The Anatomy of a Sudden No. Have you been mourning a door that slammed shut in your face, wondering why your prayers seemed to go unanswered? What felt like a painful rejection was actually a divine rescue mission designed to shield you from unseen wreckage, and I closed those paths not to punish you, but to preserve your future. You have stood before gates you were absolutely certain belonged to you. You prepared meticulously, invested your entire heart, and aligned your ambitions with a trajectory that appeared flawless. Then, without any warning or logical explanation, the handle refused to turn, and the rejection felt absolute, cold, and profoundly personal. In the human experience, a sudden denial is almost always interpreted as a personal failure. We exist within a hyper-competitive society that preaches relentless persistence, where societal conditioning insists that if you simply work hard enough, any barrier will eventually yield. We are taught that closed doors represent a lack of effort, and this modern meritocracy equates visible success with inherent worth. When an opportunity is revoked, you do not just lose a job or a relationship, you suffer a blow to your social identity, watching peers walk through their respective doors, broadcasting their victories, leaving you grappling with an isolating sense of inadequacy. But from a higher, divine vantage point, this sudden halt is an anatomy of grace. It is a highly calculated, urgent intervention, because when you are moving at the blinding speed of human ambition, you become entirely blind to the structural collapses awaiting you just a few miles down the road. You cannot perceive the deep-rooted toxicity of the environment you were desperately begging to enter. You are unaware of the subtle, daily compromises that would have slowly eroded your core values. My sudden refusal was not a rejection of your sincere effort, it was a rejection of your imminent destruction. Consider this abrupt denial as an invisible, impenetrable barrier of protection. Imagine a parent violently pulling a child back from the edge of a busy intersection. The physical motion might bruise the arm, but it undeniably saves the life. I had to pull you back with equal, jarring force. The sheer shock of the denial was completely necessary to halt your dangerous momentum. A gentle suggestion or a subtle sign would never have deterred you. You were far too convinced that this specific destination held your ultimate happiness. I had to let it slam shut in your face to save you. This forceful closure was executed to prevent a catastrophic collision with a destiny that was never meant to bear your name. You were trying to force a fit into a space too small for your spirit. Leaving that door open would have cost you your peace, your sanity, and your true calling. We often suffer from the illusion of absolute control over our life's narrative. Sociology observes how humans desperately try to script their existence to avoid uncertainty. We draft 5-year plans and build rigid frameworks for our happiness. When the script is torn up, it triggers a profound existential panic within us. Yet, true spiritual maturity begins where human control ends, and the sudden no forces a surrender of the ego. It demands that you acknowledge a wisdom far older and deeper than your strategic planning. It is a harsh reminder that your perspective is bound by time, while I see the eternal horizon. The pain you feel in the aftermath of rejection is valid, human, and deeply real, because it hurts because you cared. It hurts because your hope was genuine, and I do not dismiss the raw grief of a shattered dream, but I ask you to look beneath the surface of your immediate, stinging disappointment. Every no is heavily pregnant with a protective yes for something else. When a door is locked from the inside, it means the room is already occupied by something hostile to your growth. I am guarding you from people who would misunderstand your value and environments that would exploit your loyalty. Society measures progress by speed, but divine architecture is built on precise timing and structural integrity. You were ready to build your house on a foundation of sand simply because the plot looked beautiful in the current season. I saw the terrible storms brewing in the distance, unrecorded by human forecasts. Sometimes the denial is about protecting you from premature exposure. You asked for a platform, a position, or a partnership that you were not yet equipped to sustain. The weight of that specific blessing would have crushed your unformed character. The closed door buys you time to grow strong enough. Therefore, we must fundamentally redefine how we process rejection, realizing it is not an assessment of your inadequacy, a punishment for past mistakes, nor a sign that you have been forgotten by the universe. It is active, aggressive, and deeply intentional love, stepping directly into your timeline. When you begin to view locked gates as protective shields rather than punitive barriers, your internal landscape changes. Anxiety begins to dissolve into a grounded, quiet trust as you stop expending your vital energy trying to pick the locks of doors that were shut for your own physical and spiritual preservation. This is the raw, grounded truth of your journey, which is not always a gentle, sweeping narrative of constant upward mobility. Sometimes it is the harsh sound of a deadbolt sliding into place just as you reach for the knob. It is gritty, confusing, and profoundly human to weep over it. But once the tears dry, you must stand up and look at the hallway. The hallway is where the true transformation occurs, as it is the vital space of transition between the disaster you were saved from and the purpose you are being prepared for. The sudden no has securely placed you here, so do not let the sociological pressure to constantly achieve blind you to the theological reality of divine pacing. Your worth is not defined by how many doors you can force open. Your strength is actually revealed in your capacity to trust the cursed ones, knowing they form a protective perimeter around you. As you walk away from the door that slammed shut, carry this absolute truth with you. The rejection was a necessary redirection, and the denial was a profound deliverance. The sudden no was the ultimate yes to your true destiny. You are exactly where you need to be, safe from the unseen storms. Chapter 2. The Sound of Heaven's Pause. Following the loud, jarring slam of a closed door, there is inevitably a ringing, heavy silence. In the immediate aftermath of a sudden rejection, the sudden cessation of forward momentum creates a vacuum. Your prayers seem to echo back to you from an empty sky, completely unanswered, while the inbox remains agonizingly empty. The phone does not ring, the expected validation never materializes, and this quiet that follows the crash of your expectations is absolutely terrifying in the raw, unpolished human experience. Sociologically, you exist in an ecosystem that is engineered for perpetual noise and constant motion. You have been conditioned by a hyper-connected culture that falsely equates noise with progress and visibility with validity. You are part of a generation that views an empty calendar as a failure and a quiet season as a fatal flaw in your personal trajectory. The societal pressure to be constantly achieving, broadcasting, and moving upward creates a profound anxiety when the music suddenly stops. When the door shuts and the world goes quiet, the psychological weight of missing out presses down on your chest. You watch others seamlessly walk through their open doors, their milestones curated and celebrated on public platforms, while you are left sitting in the shadows feeling fundamentally abandoned and overlooked. Yet, this profound silence is vastly misunderstood by the human mind. You interpret the quiet as absence, assuming that because you cannot hear the machinery of your success grinding forward, the universe has forgotten you. But this is not an absence. It is the sound of heaven actively clearing the way. It is a divine pause, instituted with absolute precision. Imagine, if you will, the atmosphere inside a grand, historic symphony hall. Before the orchestra begins to play the most complex, beautiful, and demanding movement of the evening, the conductor raises his baton and demands total, breathless silence from the musicians and the audience alike. This agonizing pause is not an end to the music, nor is it a sign that the musicians have forgotten how to play. That silence is the absolute prerequisite for a masterpiece, as it heightens the senses and commands reverence. It ensures that when the first note is finally struck, it is heard with total clarity. I use the silence in your life to orchestrate exactly this kind of divine pause. When the noise of your own frantic plans, the clamor of societal expectations, and the exhausting demands of your ambition are finally muted, you are forced to listen to a different frequency. And I needed to forcibly remove you from the chaotic arena of human striving so you could finally hear the quiet, steady whispers of your true calling. Those who are set apart for a monumental destiny, the chosen ones who are meant to carry the weight of real influence, must first be stripped of their reliance on external noise. You cannot build genuine, grounded resilience while you are being perpetually applauded. The kind of internal fortitude required for the chapters ahead of you is only hammered out in the dark, quiet spaces where nobody is watching. The silence forces a confrontation with your rawest humanity, meaning, without the distraction of the pursuit, you must face your insecurities, your hidden motives, and your true foundation. This is the hidden purpose of the waiting room, as it is a rigorous, unglamorous process of internal growth. When the external world goes dark, the internal world must light up. I am using this agonizing quiet to realign your focus, shifting your gaze away from what you thought you wanted toward what you are actually built to endure. The path you were previously on would have demanded a superficial version of yourself. The path being prepared in the stillness demands your absolute, authentic core. You must learn the critical difference between isolation and divine insulation. Isolation is a trap of the enemy meant to make you feel discarded. Insulation is a protective barrier wrapped around a highly valuable asset to prevent it from losing its charge, so you are not isolated. You are insulated, and I've wrapped this silence around you to protect your energy from being drained by people and pursuits that do not belong in your future. Shift your perspective from mourning the loss of the noise to appreciating the profound, terrifying intimacy of the quiet. The silence is a protective cocoon, where inside there is no visible motion, no applause, and no external validation. To the outside observer, it looks like a tomb, but inside, a violent, miraculous transformation is occurring at a cellular level. The old form is dissolving, so that a structure capable of flight can be built. If you had walked through the door you were crying over, you would have had to maintain a frantic, exhausting pace just to survive. The demands of that wrong room would have consumed your vital energy. You would have been successful in the eyes of society, but you would have been spiritually and emotionally bankrupt. The silence you are sitting in right now is the antidote to that exhaustion. It is a mandated rest for a soul that was running dangerously close to empty. Do not mistake this quiet for divine apathy, because every second of this pause is heavily saturated with intention. As you sit in this stillness, allow the desperate need for human validation to fall away. Let the ghost of your old ambitions dissolve as you are being meticulously recalibrated for a reality that requires a grounded, unshakable spirit. Learn to inhabit the silence instead of desperately trying to escape it. Stop checking the locked door to see if the handle has magically turned. Stop trying to fill the quiet with artificial noise or frantic networking and surrender to the pause. The preparation you are undergoing in the unseen realms is far more critical than the opportunities you think you are missing in the physical world. When the time is exactly right, the conductor's baton will drop. The silence will shatter and the doors will swing open with a force and clarity that will leave you breathless. But for now, breathe in the quiet and honor the pause, understanding the silence is not a punishment. It is the sacred space where your true strength is being forged. Chapter 3: The Illusion of the Perfect Path. It is a deeply ingrained aspect of human nature to construct idealized versions of the future. From a very young age, you are taught to look ahead, to map out your trajectory, and to envision a flawless narrative for your life. You look at a specific career opportunity, a high-stakes project, or a promising romantic partnership, and your mind immediately begins to draft a seamless script. You vividly imagine the prestige, the financial stability, the warm companionship, and the undeniable societal validation that will surely follow once you step across that threshold. Sociologically speaking, you are operating exactly as you have been conditioned. We exist in an era where success is highly curated and relentlessly broadcasted. You are constantly bombarded with polished images of what a good life is supposed to look like. The culture dictates a very rigid template for happiness, a certain level of income, a specific type of relationship, a recognized status among your peers. Unconsciously, you tailor your deepest desires to fit within these narrow cultural parameters. You fall in love with the aesthetics of an opportunity rather than its reality. You become mesmerized by the illusion of the perfect path. However, what looks undeniably perfect from your ground-level perspective often contains fatal structural flaws when viewed from a higher divine vantage point. When you are standing directly in front of a door, all you can see is the intricate carving of the wood and the shine of the brass handle. You cannot see the structural integrity of the building it leads into. You cannot see the rot in the floorboards or the instability of the ceiling. You are captivated by the presentation, completely blind to the preservation hazards that lie in wait. This is where divine intervention supersedes human ambition, because I see the foundations. I operate outside the confines of linear time, meaning I do not just see the beginning of your chosen path, I see its inevitable conclusion, and I see the hidden resentments that would have taken root and grown like weeds in that seemingly perfect relationship. I see the subtle, daily ethical compromises that a specific job would have eventually demanded from you, slowly chipping away at your integrity until you no longer recognized your own reflection. The illusion of the perfect path is perhaps the most dangerous mirage a human can encounter because it does not appear threatening. It promises an oasis, promising to quench your thirst for stability and significance, but a mirage only delivers sand. It is an optical illusion created by the intense heat of your own desires and the exhausting pressure of societal expectations. You wanted it so badly that your mind projected water where there was only a desert. When you were fighting for that opportunity, crying out in frustration because the pieces of the puzzle simply refused to fall together, you felt a profound sense of failure. You thought your strategy was flawed or that your faith was insufficient. In reality, you were actually hearing the sound of a heavy lock clicking into place to keep you out of a danger zone. I am not interested in granting you a life that merely looks good on a public platform, but is silently crumbling in the private dark. I will never authorize a blessing that secretly harbors a curse. There is a specific kind of spiritual and emotional exhaustion that comes from living a life that looks perfect on the outside, but requires you to betray your core on the inside. If I had allowed you to walk down that idealized path, the sheer effort required to maintain the illusion of perfection would have drained your vital energy. You would have spent your days managing the optics of your success rather than experiencing the depth of your purpose. For those who are called to walk a path of true resilience, those tasked with bearing the weight of a highly impactful destiny, superficial success is a lethal trap. The version of you required for the monumental tasks ahead must be entirely grounded in authenticity. You cannot lead others out of darkness if you are trapped in a shiny, fragile glass house of your own making. I had to shatter the illusion of the perfect path so that you could learn to build upon bedrock. Acknowledge the visceral, very human pain of losing something that looked so right. It is entirely valid to grieve the death of an illusion. You invested genuine hope into that mirage, and the disappointment is a heavy burden to process. But as you process this grief, you must also recognize the profound mercy embedded within the denial. What you perceived as a ruthless rejection was, in fact, an act of radical preservation. Consider the people who would have surrounded you in that perfect room. From the outside, they appeared to be the network you needed, but I saw the conversations you were not privy to. I saw the transactional nature of their loyalty, and I saw how quickly they would have abandoned you when the first storm hit. By keeping that door locked, I saved you from the agonizing betrayal of placing your trust in structurally compromised alliances. Furthermore, consider the physical and mental toll that path would have extracted. Human beings often equate high stress and anxiety with high importance. You were prepared to sacrifice your peace, your health, and your quiet moments for the sake of an external achievement. You were ready to normalize a state of perpetual exhaustion, believing it to be the necessary tax on success. But my architecture for your life does not require your destruction as a down payment. The true path is designed to sustain you, not consume you. The dismantling of this illusion is a critical phase of your internal growth. It forces you to reevaluate your metrics for success, and you must unlearn the sociological conditioning that tells you a closed door is a tragedy. You must stop trusting your eyes, which are easily fooled by glossy surfaces, and begin trusting the divine intuition placed deep within your spirit. As you stand in the aftermath of this shattered illusion, you will begin to notice a profound shift in your desires. The appetite for superficial perfection will begin to wane, replaced by a deep, resonant hunger for authenticity, peace, and structural soundness. You will no longer want a relationship that just looks good in photographs. You will demand one that can withstand the trenches, and you will no longer seek a career that merely inflates your ego. You will require a calling that anchors your soul. This transition from chasing mirages to demanding reality is the hallmark of a maturing spirit. You are shedding the brittle skin of societal expectations and stepping into the grounded reality of your true identity. The perfect path was a beautifully crafted lie, and its closure was your liberation. Take a deep breath and look away from the locked door of that polished, fragile room. The illusion is gone, and the heavy, intoxicating fog of what could have been is finally lifting. What remains in its place is a clear, unobstructed view of the rugged, authentic, and brilliantly real terrain you are actually meant to traverse. You have survived the temptation of the perfect path, and now you are ready for the profound journey of the purposeful one. Chapter 4. The Welded Gate. There are doors in your past that did not simply swing shut, they were violently and permanently welded shut, and the distinction is crucial. A closed door might suggest that you can knock again tomorrow, or perhaps find a hidden key, or wait for the occupant to finally grant you entry. But a welded gate implies absolute, impenetrable finality, and you know the exact doors I am speaking of. You stood before them and tried everything within your human capacity. You bargained, you strategized, you pleaded, you changed your approach, and you poured out your soul in prayer. Yet the iron remained fused, and no amount of leverage could force it open. This level of absolute finality is profoundly difficult for the human mind to process. Sociologically, you exist in a culture that romanticizes relentless, unyielding pursuit. The modern narrative of success is built upon the dangerous cliché that you must never take no for an answer. You are taught that persistence is the ultimate virtue, and that any obstacle will eventually disintegrate if you just strike it enough times. Because of this societal conditioning, you interpreted the welded gate as a personal challenge, a test of your willpower, or worse, a cruel punishment. You spent agonizing months, perhaps years, bloodying your hands against solid steel, believing that your breakthrough was just one more push away. But I must pull back the veil on that specific season of your life and reveal the terrifying truth of what lay behind that steel. The absolute finality of that closure was not a reflection of your lack of effort, nor was it a test of your persistence. That gate was welded shut because the version of you that existed at that precise moment was fundamentally unequipped to survive the outcome of that room. If I had yielded to your desperate pleas and allowed you to walk through that gate, the atmospheric pressure of that environment would have crushed you instantly. You were deeply captivated by the glittering promise of what that space offered. The title, the relationship, the access, the financial elevation. But you were completely ignorant of the invisible, crushing weight of its demands. Look back at the person you were when you were begging for that door to open, and while you were earnest, yes, you were talented, undoubtedly, but your character was still porous, and your emotional boundaries were dangerously underdeveloped. You carried unhealed wounds from past traumas, and you harbored a desperate, unspoken need for external validation. You were a people pleaser, masquerading as a peacemaker. The individuals occupying the room behind that welded gate were not your tribe. They were predators disguised as partners, and had you entered, they would have immediately detected the scent of your unhealed trauma. They would have exploited your lack of boundaries, and they would have weaponized your desire to be accepted, extracting every ounce of your talent and vitality until you were left hollow. You would have achieved the aesthetic of success while enduring the reality of profound, silent abuse. Furthermore, the responsibilities inherent to that path would have overwhelmed your spiritual infrastructure. It is a terrifying thing to be handed a heavy weight before your skeletal system has fully hardened. Like a deep-sea submersible descending into the Mariana Trench before its hull has been properly forged and tested, implosion was not just a possibility, it was an absolute physical certainty because you possessed the talent to unlock the door. But you lacked the structural integrity to survive the room. This is the divine mechanics of preservation. I am not merely a gatekeeper who arbitrarily decides who gets what they want. I am the architect of your soul's capacity, and I know exactly what your frame can bear. I measure the tensile strength of your spirit, and when I saw the immense discrepancy between your fragile state and the brutal demands of that environment, I did not just close the door. I brought down the fire, the iron, and the sparks, and I sealed it off entirely. I welded that gate shut because I loved you far too much to allow you to be destroyed by the fulfillment of your own premature ambitions. Spiritual and emotional maturity cannot be microwaved, hacked, or fast-tracked. It must be meticulously forged in the fires of lived experience and tempered in the cold waters of deep disappointment. The pain you felt when you realized that gate would never open was the exact fire I used to begin forging your new boundaries. The heartbreak of that finality was the catalyst that forced you to turn inward, to finally address the wounds you had been ignoring, and to stop seeking salvation in external opportunities. To give you the prize before you possessed the internal fortitude to hold it responsibly would have been an act of divine negligence. A blessing given out of season rapidly rots into a curse. Therefore, when you look back at your history and see the gates that are permanently, undeniably sealed behind you, you must stop viewing them as the graveyards of your lost potential. They are not monuments to your failure. Instead, view those welded gates as the defining markers of your ultimate safety zone. They were established by a creator who sees the end from the beginning, who knows exactly what you can handle and what would ultimately dismantle your destiny. The finality was a shield, and the denial was a rescue mission. It is time to step away from the steel and stop standing in the hallway of your past, staring at a door that will never open, wondering what could have been. Your fingernails are worn down from scratching at an impenetrable surface, and your spirit is exhausted from fighting a battle you were deliberately meant to lose. Turn your back to the welded gate, take a deep cleansing breath, and release the heavy burden of what if. Divine truth, I will never, under any circumstances, allow you to enter a room that your character cannot sustain. A delayed blessing is a preserved blessing, but a denied path is a saved life. You survived the rejection because you were never meant to survive the acceptance. Chapter 5. Stillness as Strategic Preparation. Let the finality of the past settle into your spirit, not as a source of grief, but as a profound, unshakable assurance that your future is being fiercely and jealously guarded. The gate was welded shut so that your ultimate purpose could remain wide open. You are currently standing in what feels like an endless, echoing waiting room. The old doors have definitively closed behind you. The welded gates have been left in the past, and yet the new doors of your future have not even begun to open. There is no visible movement, there are no sudden breakthroughs, no dramatic shifts in your circumstances, and no immediate evidence that your circumstances are about to change. You are suspended in a heavy, prolonged period of stillness, and to your human mind, this lack of forward momentum feels deeply agonizing. Sociologically, you have been engineered to despise waiting, inhabiting a modern ecosystem that is entirely optimized for immediate gratification. You have access to instant communication, instant streaming, instant deliveries, and instant metrics of validation. You belong to a hustle culture that constantly reinforces the narrative that if you are not actively moving forward, you are inherently falling behind. Society equates motion with value, and you are taught that to be worthy, you must be constantly producing, constantly visible, and constantly climbing. Therefore, when your life suddenly gears down into neutral, you interpret this stillness as a critical malfunction. You feel a profound sense of personal and spiritual stagnation, plagued by the terrifying thought that the universe has simply placed you on a shelf and forgotten you. But you must elevate your understanding from the frantic timeline of society to the profound intentionality of the divine economy. In the realm of ultimate purpose, stillness is never passive, as it is a highly active, intense, and calculated phase of strategic preparation. Consider the mechanics of an archer preparing to strike a distant, critical target. The archer does not simply throw the arrow forward. Instead, the arrow is forcefully pulled backward, drawn away from its destination, and held in a state of immense, trembling tension. To an observer who does not understand the weapon, it appears that the arrow is going in the wrong direction and then completely stalling out. But that period of intense stillness is not stagnation. It is the exact moment where the kinetic energy required for the launch is being fiercely gathered. Without that violent pullback and that heavy, deliberate pause, the arrow would have no power to penetrate its target. You are currently the arrow in the bow, and the tension you feel, the frustration, the restlessness, the desperate urge to break free is the gathering of your spiritual and emotional kinetic energy. For the chosen ones, those individuals explicitly marked for destinies that require profound influence and leadership, this period of internal growth is entirely non-negotiable. You cannot inherit a monumental calling with a fragile internal infrastructure. If you're going to carry a heavy, transformative purpose in this world, you must possess a level of resilience that cannot be faked or bypassed. And true resilience is never built on a public stage. It is meticulously constructed in the quiet, unglamorous shadows of the waiting room. I'm using this interval of stillness for your deep internal fortification, which is an intensely human, thoroughly grounded process. There is no magic spell that grants you character overnight. Instead, there is the slow, sometimes agonizing work of shifting your reliance from external achievements to internal stability. Right now, beneath the surface where no one can applaud your progress, I am driving your root system incredibly deep into the bedrock. Why must the roots go so deep? Because the altitude of where I am taking you is accompanied by fierce, unprecedented winds. The new environments you will soon enter, the new responsibilities you will shoulder, and the new level of spiritual warfare you will encounter would instantly topple a tree with a shallow foundation. The preparation you are undergoing in the dark soil of this waiting season is the exact structural integrity that will keep you standing when the storms of your elevation finally hit. You must view this current period not as a punishment, but as a divine sanctuary. It is a space designed specifically for you to unlearn the frantic behaviors that society has forced upon you. You are being detoxified from the need to constantly prove your worth through relentless output. I am teaching you the rigorous, beautiful discipline of trust, teaching you that you do not have to manipulate your circumstances, force relationships, or manufacture your own breakthroughs. Do not waste the waiting room trying to pick the lock on the exit door. So many individuals sabotage their own preparation by refusing to surrender to the stillness. They frantically pace the floor, expending their vital energy, trying to break out of the very cocoon that was designed to transform them. If you break out of the chrysalis before the wings are fully formed, you will emerge into your new season entirely incapable of flight. You will have to walk through a reality where you were meant to soar. Instead, embrace the profound intentionality of the delay, because timing is the single most critical element of a lasting blessing. The right opportunity, encountered at the wrong time, becomes a devastating burden. So I'm not delaying your destiny. I am synchronizing your internal readiness with the external environment. I am moving pieces on the board that you cannot even see, orchestrating intersections, preparing the hearts of the people you will soon meet, and clearing the wreckage from your future path. All of this requires time, and all of this requires your stillness. The waiting room is not a barrier keeping you from your destination. Right now, the preparation is the destination. Chapter 6. Shedding the baggage of expectations. The lessons you absorb in this quiet space, the humility, the patience, the grounded, human-like resilience are the exact tools you will use to govern your future. Divine truth. You are not stranded in the quiet, you are concealed in the quiver. The pullback is severe because your target is monumental. Breathe deeply into the stillness. Stop measuring your progress by how fast you are moving and begin measuring it by how deeply you are growing. The silence is heavy, but it is holy, and when the tension has reached its absolute peak and your internal growth is finally complete, the string will release. And when it does, no earthly force will be able to stop the trajectory I have set for you. As you sit within the profound, echoing stillness of the waiting room, you must come to understand the fundamental physics of your upcoming elevation. The architectural design of the new doors I am actively preparing for you comes with a strict, non-negotiable condition: you must travel light. You cannot bring the heavy, suffocating luggage of your past seasons into the sacred, expansive spaces of your future. Much of the agonizing pain you are currently experiencing in this quiet interval does not stem from the stillness itself, but from the exhausting, daily effort of holding on to bags you were never meant to carry this far. Sociologically, human beings are pack animals of expectation, and from the moment you are born, society begins handing you invisible suitcases. Your family hands you the luggage of their unfulfilled dreams, their generational anxieties, and their rigid definitions of security. Your culture hands you a tightly structured timeline, a heavy, ironclad briefcase dictating exactly where you should be, what you should own, and who you should be married to by the age of 25, 30, or 40. Your peers hand you the duffel bags of comparison, forcing you to carry the weight of measuring your raw, behind-the-scenes reality against their highly curated, filtered highlight reels. Over time, you have slowly become a beast of burden for the expectations of others. You have loaded your own shoulders with the ghosts of your obsolete ambitions, goals you set for yourself years ago when you possessed only a fraction of the wisdom and spiritual depth you hold today. The heaviest piece of luggage you currently carry is often labeled potential. Society loves to define your potential based on your innate talents, your academic pedigree, or your early successes. They draw a logical map of where your potential should take you. And when my divine redirection forces you off that logical map, you feel a crushing, paralyzing sense of guilt, as if you are squandering your gifts. But human definitions of potential are almost entirely tied to economic output and social status. Divine potential is tied to internal transformation and eternal resonance, and to step into your true destiny, you must violently evict the world's definition of your potential from your mind. You are exhausted. You are not just exhausted from the doors that closed in your face, you are exhausted from dragging the massive weight of who you thought you should be up to the threshold of every single opportunity. When I closed those doors and welded those gates shut, a specific and deeply necessary tragedy occurred: the death of your projected identity. When you attach your core worth to a specific job title, a relationship status, or a certain level of societal prestige, a closed door does not just feel like a missed opportunity, it feels like a literal death. And you grieve so intensely because you believe a vital piece of your intrinsic value has been permanently severed. But you must hear this divine truth clearly, echoing through the silence: I am not killing you, I am killing the illusion of you. I am systematically dismantling the false identities you constructed to survive in rooms that were far beneath your calling. The pain of the waiting room is the pain of ego death. It is the agonizing but ultimately liberating process of shedding the brittle, suffocating skin of performance. You are learning the harsh reality that your worth is not a commodity to be traded for societal approval. I'm using this enforced quiet pause to strip away every single layer of your identity that is not authentically, undeniably, and eternally you. The stillness you're sitting in right now is a divine invitation to unpack, so look down at your spiritual hands. Look at how tightly your knuckles are gripping the handles of past resentments, expired dreams, and the desperate, burning need to prove your worth to people who fundamentally misunderstood you. It is time to let them drop, releasing the need to retroactively win arguments with those who walked away from you. Release the timeline you meticulously drafted for your life. It is a document of profound limitation authored by a human mind that cannot comprehend the miraculous scale of what is coming. Shed the identity that was entirely dependent on external applause, because the people you are trying so desperately to impress are struggling with their own heavy luggage. They are not the judges of your destiny, nor are they the authors of your fulfillment. Dropping this baggage is an incredibly vulnerable act, because when you have worn a heavy coat of armor for years, taking it off leaves you feeling exposed, cold, and unprotected against the elements. You have used your past traumas and your rigid, 5-year plans as a shield to protect yourself from the terrifying uncertainty of the unknown. You thought that if you planned perfectly, you could avoid pain. You thought that if you carried the memory of every past rejection, it would serve as a map of where not to walk. But carrying the trauma of the past only guarantees that you will recreate it in your future. I am asking you to stand emotionally naked in the quiet. I am asking you to trust that my invisible protection is far superior to the heavy, rusted armor of your own defensive mechanisms. Why is this stripping process so absolute, and why must you drop every single bag? Because the massive breakthrough ahead of you requires radical, unprecedented agility. The highway I have paved for your monumental purpose is entirely unobstructed, but the entrance gate is narrow. You cannot maneuver through the complex, high-altitude environments of your future if you are weighed down by the need to be universally liked and understood. Leadership, true influence, and profound purpose require an absolute purity of heart, and purity does not mean a lack of human mistakes. It means a fierce singleness of intention. And you cannot serve the high calling on your life if you are constantly looking over your shoulder to see if society approves of your trajectory. You must become completely, radically indifferent to both the applause and the criticism of the crowd. Divine truth. You cannot inherit a limitless future while fiercely guarding the limitations of your past. As you drop these bags one by one onto the floor of the waiting room, you will begin to feel a strange, terrifying lightness. Your shoulders will finally drop, and the chronic tension in your spirit will begin to dissolve. You will realize that you were never actually afraid of the future. You were just too exhausted to face it while carrying the immense weight of the past. Chapter 7. Disguised promotions. You must become light enough to be carried by the wind of my purpose, rather than dragged down by the gravity of human opinion. Leave the luggage behind, because the new rooms are already fully furnished. When you are abruptly and forcefully pushed off your carefully plotted path, the immediate sensation is rarely one of triumph. It does not feel like a step up. It feels distinctly like a demotion, a brutal detour, or a punitive measure for some unknown failure. You look at the rugged, unpaved, and highly unfamiliar terrain you have been unceremoniously dropped onto, and you cannot help but painfully compare it to the smooth, brightly lit, and heavily paved highway you were forced to leave behind. Human nature dictates that we evaluate our circumstances almost entirely through the lens of comfort, predictability, and external validation. When those elements are violently stripped away, our immediate panicked conclusion is that we have lost significant ground. Sociologically, you exist within a complex system that has rigidly defined the architecture of success, and society worships the linear ascent. You have been conditioned since childhood to believe in the concept of the corporate ladder. A metaphor that falsely implies success is merely a matter of climbing rung by rung in a perfectly straight, uninterrupted vertical line. In this dominant cultural paradigm, a promotion always comes with a highly predictable set of markers, a better job title, a higher salary, an increase in societal clout, and the overt applause of your peers. Consequently, any lateral move, any sudden pivot into an entirely different field, or any season that requires starting over at the bottom is deeply stigmatized. The collective gaze of society views your detour as a failure of planning or a lack of competence. The cultural narrative whispers maliciously that if you had just been smarter, worked harder, or been more strategic, you would have stayed on the main highway. This sociological conditioning makes the divine pivot incredibly agonizing, because you are not just battling your own internal disorientation and fear of the unknown, you are actively battling the perceived judgment, pity, and whispered criticisms of everyone watching you. But to survive this transition and step into your true power, you must undergo a radical, foundational paradigm shift in how you recognize elevation. Divine elevation rarely, if ever, looks like human promotion, and I do not operate within the narrow confines of corporate ladders, societal timelines, or human metrics of prestige. Acknowledge this profound, counterintuitive reality. Being forcefully pushed onto a terrifying new path is very often a massive promotion disguised as a rejection of your original plan. The universe does not deal in demotions for the chosen ones, it deals in strategic realignments. The previous room you were occupying, the relationship that felt so comfortable, the job you could execute with your eyes closed, the social circle that constantly praised you, had become dangerously small for your rapidly expanding calling. You had grown so accustomed to the limited dimensions of that room that you stopped noticing how much you had to stoop and shrink yourself just to walk through the door. You had hit a firm ceiling, but because the ceiling was painted beautifully and adorned with familiar comforts, you tragically mistook it for the sky. Comfort is one of the most lethal, silent enemies of a monumental destiny. It sedates your ambition, numbs your spiritual instincts, and slowly paralyzes your internal growth. If I had yielded to your prayers and allowed you to stay in that room, you would have become spiritually and emotionally stunted. You would have spent the rest of your life playing a remarkably small game, safely operating within your proven limits, and settling for a life that was merely good enough, when I had long ago ordained a life that is truly extraordinary. Therefore, your sudden removal from that space was not a rejection. It was an eviction notice served by grace. I had to forcibly evict you from your comfort zone before it permanently became your coffin. Consider the biological reality of how a lobster grows, where the lobster is a soft, fleshy animal living inside a rigid shell. That rigid shell does not expand, and as the lobster grows, that shell becomes incredibly confining, and the lobster feels itself under immense, agonizing pressure. It is deeply uncomfortable, and to survive and continue growing, the lobster must retreat to a dark, vulnerable place under a rock, violently shed its old shell, and produce a new, larger one. If the lobster possessed a human mind, it would interpret that terrifying pressure and the loss of its protective shell as a catastrophic failure. It would think it was dying, but the discomfort is the exact biological signal that it is time to expand. You are feeling the crushing pressure of a shell that can no longer contain the magnitude of your spirit. The new territory I'm leading you into is deeply intimidating precisely because it is a promotion to a larger shell. It demands significantly more from you, whereas the previous path was easy. It relied heavily on your natural talents, your charm, and your practiced routines, requiring very little of your deep, forged character. But this new, rugged path requires you to operate at an entirely different frequency. It demands that you take unprecedented risks, that you lean into a terrifying level of vulnerability, and that you trust with a faith that utterly defies human logic. You are being asked to build in the dark, to lead without a formal title, and to create without a safety net or a guaranteed audience. What feels like a demotion simply because the recognizable markers of success have been temporarily stripped away is actually the universe clearing out the superficial clutter so you can step into a role of pure, unadulterated authority and influence. You will likely notice that the people from your previous path do not understand your new direction. They may look at your current struggles and offer you their pity. You must fiercely resist the urge to explain your divine pivot to earthly minds. They are evaluating your life using a map of a territory you no longer inhabit. You cannot translate the mathematics of heaven into the language of societal expectations, so let them misunderstand you. Their comprehension is not a requirement for your destination. It is time to stop grieving the loss of a room that could no longer hold your potential. The rejection of your original, carefully crafted plan was the absolute, non-negotiable catalyst for your ultimate elevation. You have not been pushed back, you have been strategically positioned for a quantum leap. Chapter 8: The Crucible of Character. When you finally grasp the sheer magnitude of the calling that awaits you in this new, expansive territory, you will look back at the tiny, comfortable room you cried over and realize it was merely a closet. Divine truth: do not cry over a closed door when I have already removed the roof, for your eviction was an elevation. Embrace the disguise and accept the promotion, knowing the rugged path beneath your feet is the only road capable of bearing the immense weight of the glory that is about to be revealed in you. As you navigate the rugged, unfamiliar terrain of your disguised promotion, you will inevitably begin to notice a profound shift in the atmospheric demands of your environment. Take a moment to deeply observe the new territory you are entering. Notice how it requires a level of emotional intelligence, profound grace, and unshakable fortitude that the previous path could never have developed within you. The previous path, the one you mourned so deeply when it closed, was objectively easy. It relied almost entirely on your natural talents, your innate charisma, and your practiced intellectual abilities. It was a path that demanded a performance, but it required very little of your deep, authentic character. Sociologically, we live in a culture that is dangerously obsessed with raw talent and entirely dismissive of character development. Modern society idolizes the overnight success, the prodigy, and the viral sensation. You are taught to polish your resume, sharpen your hard skills, and perfect your elevator pitch. The sociological marketplace rewards those who can capture attention, regardless of whether they have the internal integrity to sustain it. Because of this, you see a constant, tragic cycle in the public sphere: individuals who are elevated rapidly by their exceptional gifts, only to experience catastrophic, very public downfalls because their internal foundation could not bear the weight of their external platform. Talent is the shiny key that opens the door, but character is the structural integrity that allows you to survive the room. If I had allowed you to walk through the doors you previously prayed for, your talent would have undoubtedly granted you entry. You would have performed brilliantly for a season, but eventually the intense pressure of the environment, the complex interpersonal conflicts, and the inevitable storms of leadership would have hit you. Without a deeply forged character, you would have collapsed under the weight. Your natural charm would have run dry, and your unhealed insecurities would have hijacked your decision-making. I could not allow you to become a casualty of premature elevation. This brings us to the profound theological purpose of your recent suffering. The locked doors, the agonizing silence, the endless waiting room, and the sudden, jarring shifts in direction. All of these elements were not random accidents of the universe. They formed a meticulously designed crucible. In metallurgy, a crucible is a specific vessel made of highly durable material designed to withstand extreme, brutal temperatures. It is used to melt down raw metals so that the impurities, or slag, can be burned away and skimmed off the top, leaving only the purest, strongest element behind. The fire does not destroy the gold. It reveals it by destroying everything that is not gold. Your spirit has been inside the crucible, and I have been intentionally turning up the heat through the friction of your circumstances. I have been melting down your pride, the part of you that believed you knew better than the architect of your destiny. I have been melting down your impatience, the frantic, anxious energy that demanded immediate results to validate your worth. I have been burning away your need for ultimate control, the exhausting illusion that if you just gripped the steering wheel tightly enough, you could force the universe to comply with your timeline. The process of the crucible is agonizing, and when your ego is being burned away, it feels like you are losing a vital part of yourself. You felt the heat when your perfectly laid plans disintegrated, and you felt the burning when people you trusted walked away during your darkest season. You felt the intense, crushing pressure of being misunderstood and overlooked. But what you interpreted as destruction was, in reality, the divine process of purification. You cannot inherit a monumental destiny with an immature spirit. The people you are meant to lead, the complex spaces you are meant to influence, and the massive blessings you are meant to steward require a version of you that has been rigorously tested in the fire. If you are going to hold a position of true authority, not just a superficial title but genuine, transformative influence, you must possess a backbone made of titanium. A monumental destiny comes with monumental spiritual warfare, and you will face criticism that is deeply unfair. You will encounter betrayals that defy logic, and you will be required to make agonizing decisions that will not win you any popularity contests. An immature spirit, one that still desperately craves the applause of the crowd and shrinks at the first sign of conflict, will abandon the mission when the warfare begins. But a spirit that has survived the crucible will stand its ground. Embrace the reality that the severe struggles you faced over the last few years were not sent to destroy you. They were sent to construct the internal architecture necessary to uphold your future. The fire was building your capacity for empathy so that when you lead others, you do so not with arrogance, but with a deep, grounded understanding of human suffering. The silence was building your emotional regulation so that you no longer react out of panic, but respond out of peace. Look at yourself now, standing on the precipice of this new beginning. You are fundamentally different than you were before the doors closed. You are no longer easily shaken by the transient, fickle opinions of others. When someone withdraws their approval, you no longer spiral into a crisis of identity because your identity has been anchored to something eternal. You are no longer driven by the frantic, chaotic energy of anxiety. You are propelled by the steady, quiet power of purpose. You have learned to separate your intrinsic worth from your external productivity. You have learned that true strength is not the ability to force a door open, but the grace to stand peacefully in front of a closed one. Divine truth. The fire of disappointment was never meant to consume you. It was meant to consume the fragile things you were relying on, meaning you are not broken, you are forged. The crucible has finished its work, and the impurities that would have sabotaged your ultimate purpose have been skimmed away. The version of you that now remains is dense, solid, and utterly unshakable. You have survived the fire, and because of that, you are finally ready to carry the immense weight of the glory that is about to be placed into your hands. Chapter 9. The Highway of Peace. As the grueling, transformative period of the Crucible finally begins to fulfill its profound purpose, a distinct and permanent shift will occur within your spirit. You will wake up one day and notice a startling absence. The frantic, gnawing urge to hustle for your basic worth has entirely vanished. The desperate need to bang your bruised fists against locked gates has been replaced by a quiet, grounded stillness. This is the definitive sign that the waiting room has successfully completed its work. You are no longer reacting to the trauma of your past. You are finally prepared to respond to the purpose of your future. To understand the magnitude of this shift, you must first acknowledge how you were previously operating. Sociologically, you have been deeply trained to run on the toxic, highly combustible fuel of anxiety. The modern economy and the culture of relentless ambition thrive on keeping you in a perpetual state of fight or flight. You were taught that if a goal did not make you hyperventilate with stress, it was simply not a goal worth pursuing. You falsely equated the physical symptoms of anxiety, the knots in your stomach, the racing heartbeat, the chronic insomnia, with passion and drive. You chased opportunities that consistently triggered your deepest insecurities, believing that the adrenaline rush of a chaotic environment was the feeling of destiny. You thought that if something was difficult, painful, and constantly draining, it must be exactly what you were supposed to be doing. Society handed you a narrative that romanticized exhaustion, insisting that true success is only born from suffering, burnout, and the absolute depletion of your human limits. But you must now unlearn this deeply flawed sociological conditioning. Divine alignment does not operate in the chaotic, frantic frequency of panic. I do not drive those who belong to me with the cruel whip of anxiety, artificial urgency, or the fear of missing out. The path I have meticulously laid out for you, the one you are finally stepping onto, operates on an entirely different wavelength, the frequency of deep, unshakable, and profoundly grounded peace. Peace is not the absence of hard work, nor is it the elimination of human challenges. It is a highly resilient internal fortress, representing the quiet, authoritative knowing that you are exactly where you are supposed to be, doing exactly what you are equipped to do. For years, you viewed the closed doors and the sudden no's of your past as catastrophic roadblocks. You thought they were massive concrete barricades dropped in the middle of your path to halt your progress and punish your ambition. But as you look at the landscape of your life from this new, elevated perspective, the architecture of your journey becomes strikingly clear. Those closed doors were never roadblocks, they were the heavy, reinforced guardrails of a high-speed, direct highway. Think about the physical design of a massive, elevated highway, which is built to carry you rapidly toward your ultimate destination. But because of the speed and the altitude, the highway requires indestructible guardrails to prevent a fatal crash over the edge. Every single time you attempted to veer off course, chasing a toxic relationship, begging for a job that would have compromised your soul, trying to force your way into a room full of people who would have exploited your light, you slammed into a guardrail. The impact hurt, bruising your ego and shattering your timeline. But that violent, jarring no was the very thing that bounced you back into the center lane, ensuring it kept you moving forward. You stand firm now in the undeniable confidence that every rejection you ever faced was actively paving this direct, unobstructed highway to your ultimate destination. You did not lose your way, you were kept safely on it. As you travel down this highway of peace, the new opportunities I have prepared for you will begin to materialize, and they will behave fundamentally differently than the mirages of your past. You will not have to kick these new doors off their hinges. You will not have to manipulate the gatekeepers, compromise your ethical boundaries, or exhaust your spirit trying to prove you deserve to be inside. These new doors will function like automatic sensors, and when you walk toward them, aligned with your true, authentic, human-like self stripped of pretense and heavy expectations, they will simply glide open. They will recognize the frequency of your purified character, and when you step into these new rooms, you will immediately notice the difference in the atmospheric pressure. In the wrong rooms of your past, you constantly had to shrink yourself. You had to dim your intelligence, bite your tongue, and contort your personality to make others feel comfortable with your presence. But in the rooms I have ordained for your future, you can stand at your absolute full height. Your gifts will be celebrated, not tolerated, and your grounded vulnerability will be recognized as your greatest strength, not an exploitable weakness. This is why the previous chapters of your life required such a brutal stripping away of your ego. You needed to become so intimately familiar with the genuine sound of peace that you would never again accept chaos as a substitute. Peace is now your ultimate, non-negotiable compass, and from this moment forward, you will navigate your destiny using a beautifully simple metric. If an opportunity, a relationship, or a contract costs you your peace, the price is too high, and the answer is an immediate, unapologetic no. If a situation triggers the old, familiar, frantic energy of the hustle, if it demands that you abandon your authentic self to gain entry, you will recognize it instantly as a distraction, and you will simply walk away. Divine truth. The ultimate evidence of divine direction is not a lack of opposition, but the presence of an inexplicable, anchored peace in the midst of the journey. You have finally arrived at the place where your ambition is no longer fueled by a desperate need to outrun your trauma. Your drive is now fueled by the quiet, joyful pursuit of your calling. The anxiety that kept you awake for so many agonizing nights has been permanently evicted, replaced by a grounded, human reality where you can finally rest. Prepare yourself, for the imminent arrival of everything you prayed for is at hand, and this time it perfectly aligns with your peace as you walk confidently down the highway, for the road is entirely clear. Chapter 10. The Monumental Destiny Revealed. The time of looking over your shoulder has officially come to an end. For months, perhaps years, your gaze has been fixed firmly on the rear-view mirror of your life. You've spent countless hours analyzing the welded gates, mourning the sudden rejections, and trying to decipher the heavy silence of the waiting room. But the season of grieving your closed doors must now permanently transform into the celebration of your divine preservation. The long, agonizing night of your preparation is over, and the dawn of your unfolding purpose is breaking with undeniable clarity. It is time to step out of the shadows of the waiting room and stand firmly on the threshold of your new reality. As you walk out into the light of this new season, the grand, meticulous design of your life becomes breathtakingly visible. From this elevated vantage point, you no longer see a series of random failures or isolated rejections. Instead, you see a magnificent, intricately woven tapestry, despite how sociologically the human mind struggles to comprehend non-linear progress. Society trains you to view success as a straight, uninterrupted line from point A to point B, meaning when your path zigzagged violently, when it stalled out entirely, or when it threw you backward. Your earthly conditioning told you that your life was falling apart, but now, as the masterpiece is revealed, you understand the divine architecture. Every single rejection, every painful pivot, every silent night, and every betrayed trust was a critical, load-bearing thread in the magnificent tapestry of your destiny. As you look at the massive, monumental purpose that is now standing wide open before you, you must confront a chilling, beautiful truth. If even one of those previous doors had opened, you would not be here. Pause and let the sheer gravity of that realization settle into your bones. If the universe had granted the desperate prayers you prayed 5 years ago, you would currently be trapped inside a reality far too small for your spirit. If that specific relationship had worked out, you would be emotionally suffocated right now, shrinking your potential daily just to keep the peace. If you had landed that prestigious job you cried over losing, your creative voice would have been corporatized, sanitized, and ultimately silenced by an environment that valued compliance over calling. You did not miss out on your destiny, you missed out on your destruction. You were spared from the agonizing fate of being wildly successful at the wrong life. You are stepping into a destiny that demands the exact, fiercely grounded, human-like resilience you've spent the last few years developing. This monumental purpose is not merely about achieving a higher tax bracket or acquiring a new level of societal fame. Those are superficial metrics that rust and fade for the chosen ones, those specifically marked to carry the weight of generational influence and to build sanctuaries for others. Destiny is about undeniable impact. It is about possessing the profound, unshakable internal fortitude to stand in the midst of a chaotic world and offer absolute, grounded truth. The people you are about to lead, the rooms you're about to walk into, and the projects you're about to launch require a leader who has survived the fire. Because you know the agonizing sting of rejection, you will lead with unprecedented empathy. Because you have sat in the terrifying silence of the waiting room, you will not be intimidated by the absence of immediate applause. Because your ego was brutally melted down in the Crucible, you will wield your new authority not as a weapon of pride, but as a deeply human instrument of healing. Your life is no longer just a narrative of survival, it is now a living, breathing testimony. And notice how this testimony begins, as it does not begin with a loud, chaotic explosion of fireworks or a frantic scramble for the spotlight. It begins in the quiet, anchored stillness that has finally, organically bloomed into decisive action. You're moving forward not with the erratic, anxious energy of someone trying to prove their worth, but with the slow, unstoppable momentum of a glacier. You now possess the ultimate advantage. You are no longer afraid of the word no. The world has lost its ability to threaten you with rejection because you have empirically proven that a closed door is just the universe's way of keeping you on the highway of peace. You have unlearned the frantic hustle, and you have shed the heavy luggage of societal expectations. You have stopped negotiating your boundaries to accommodate the insecurities of others, making you beautifully, terrifyingly free. As you prepare to cross the threshold into this new territory, remember the absolute sovereignty of the protection that surrounds you. You are protected from the unseen wreckage, and you are meticulously prepared by the stillness. You are perfectly positioned by the very detours that broke your heart. Walk forward now with the fierce, unapologetic grace of someone who knows they are unconditionally guarded by heaven. Hold your head high, not in arrogance, but in the quiet confidence of a spirit that has been tested by the fire and found to be unbreakable. The wreckage was entirely avoided, and the unseen storm was bypassed. The grand illusion was shattered, leaving only the beautiful, rugged truth in its wake. So look at the door before you. It does not have a lock, nor does it require a password, a compromise, or a performance. It is a door uniquely contoured to the exact shape of your authentic soul. No human institution, no shifting economic tide, no sociological pressure, and absolutely no past failure possesses the authority to shut it. Your preservation is complete, your preparation is finished, so step in, because your monumental destiny is finally here.